Probably Kelsey. Good morning, I'm Stepanie Massicotte. This is Saskatoon Morning. This morning, we're broadcasting live from Glass and Lumber on 20th Street for Saskatoon Votes 2024. A warm welcome to those listening or watching. We will get into our live debate in just a minute, but first, Danny Kerslake joins us. Good morning, Danny. What's making news?
Some concern in the city this morning about the Housing Accelerator Fund. Federal opposition leader says if elected, he would scrap that fund, but it would bring $41 million to this city, and at stake is 1,600 new rental units. The mayor says he's asking the federal conservatives to consider their plans. To the provincial election now, the NDP is doing better than the Sask party in those mail-in votes. More seats for the NDP, one more for the Sask party, but Saskatoon Westview and Saskatoon Willow Grove remain too close to call.
Well, it seems to be a beautiful start to November. A little chilly to start the morning, but we are expecting a high of 6 today. Tonight we'll dip down to -8, but with that wind chill, it'll feel a little closer to that -12 degree mark. But looking ahead to the weekend, going to be another beautiful one, hovering around 6 to 8 degrees. Right now, though, it is -3, feeling closer to -7 with that wind chill. How's traffic, Danny?
Some new work expected today on College in a couple of places, from Circle to Preston, also Clarence to Cumberland. And watch for work crews in the acceleration lanes at Circle Drive East. Call us with traffic reports anytime. It's 306-956-7456.
Thanks, Danny. The time now is 12 minutes after 7 o'clock. Welcome to our Saskatoon Votes 2024 Mayor's Debate. Advanced polling stations are open today. Official voting day is Monday, November 13th. Today we are live at Glass and Lumber on 20th Street. There are several ways to watch and listen this morning. We are, of course, on your radio on 94.1 FM or on the CBC Listen app, but you can also watch us on CBC Saskatchewan's YouTube page or head to our website at cbc.ca/Saskatoon. And if you're already watching, hi, welcome, good morning. We are joined by 3 candidates who hope to become Saskatoon's next mayor. Don Atchison served as mayor between 2003 and 2016. Good morning, Mr. Atchison.
Good morning. Wonderful to be with you.
Cynthia Block has served on council as councillor for Ward 6 since 2016. Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning.
And former Saskatchewan Party Cabinet Minister Gord Wyant. Mr. Wyant was an MLA from 2010 until he resigned earlier this year. Good morning.
Good morning.
There are 5 total candidates for mayor. We did invite candidate Kerry Tarasoff, but he declined our invitation. Candidate Mike Harder has not responded to a request to be interviewed by CBC. Now, the format we're following this morning is this. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer the first question uninterrupted. After that, we will then open the floor for debate. Now, I want to remind you in that debate section, each of you will have a chance to respond to each other, but please be respectful of your fellow candidates. Try not to talk over one another. We, of course, don't want this turning into a shouting match. We want those listening and watching to be able to hear each one of you. At the end of the day, this is a chance for voters to get to know you and your vision for the city we all live in. Now, candidates, the clock is directly in front of you, so you are able to keep track of time. Again, you will be given 1 minute following the first question and then time for an open debate. We will cover a range of election issues, crime, homelessness, taxes, housing, and the downtown arena. So a reminder to stay on topic as much as possible with your answers during that debate portion. Our first question is something that has dominated the campaign so far, and that is the issue of crime in our city. Saskatoon consistently ranks near the top of the list in Statistics Canada's Crime Severity Index. And this past year alone, violent crime, including homicides, robberies, stalking, and abductions, is up 10%. Citizen surveys also commonly rank crime as a top concern for citizens in our city. For this question, we will go in alphabetical order. Again, each of you will have 1 minute to respond. Mr. Atchison, you will go first. The question this morning is, if you were elected mayor, what would you do to reduce crime in our city? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, you can't, people say you can't police your way out of crime for drugs and alcoholism and mental illness. But I can tell you right now, policing can take you from an unsafe city to a safe city. What we need to do on the policing side is, in fact, have more officers on the street. We need also to bring back what's called ComStats to the city of Saskatoon, where they in fact analyze what's going on so that officers can be put into the correct locations to deal with those situations. Police officers also need to be able to stop people on the street. If someone's carrying a TV on their back at 2 o'clock in the morning down a back alley, I would expect an officer to stop and ask them if they need some help to take it home. If someone looks like they're in medical distress on the street, I would expect a police officer to stop and take them as well to the places that are required for their safety at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Atchison. Ms. Block, you are next. You have 1 minute.
I've had the opportunity to have important conversations with our chief of police, chief of fire, and the folks at transit. And I know that new resources are needed, but I also think that we need a different approach. I think that, when we're spending 24 cents out of every taxpayer's dollar for policing, we clearly need to find a different approach. And my plan is to make sure that police, fire, and transit have the resources that they need today. And some of these will be new resources, technology, see something, say something, ways to make sure that we are not only being proactive, but actually have some measurable results. But I think in the long run, we also have to make sure that we are building community safety from the ground up. And that's a different approach. That's neighborhood and business district safety plans working together, and also focusing on youth, a place for youth to be, including a 24/7 youth drop-in center.
Thank you, Ms. Block. Mr. Wyant, you have 1 minute.
Well, there's no question that policing is a challenge in this community. We see businesses that lock their doors on 2nd Avenue. We see broken windows on 2nd Avenue. My approach to this is to increase the number of resources that we have at the police department, not just officers on the street, but more resources in terms of technology. And I've had conversations with the chief of police about this as well. I think one of the key factors in terms of enhancing policing on the street, in terms of adding more officers, is to have a decentralization of the police service, to create more precinct offices in and around Saskatoon where the police are working in their communities. Police chief tells me that they spend 40 to 50% of their time driving around the city of Saskatoon. When those resources, that time can be used in community, getting to know the community, getting to know people in the community. So the decentralization of the police force is a key element that I think we need to do, including adding police officers. We have a great shortage of police officers when compared to the city of Regina on a per capita basis. We need to fix that.
Thank you, Mr. Wyant. We will now have 5 minutes for open debate, and a reminder, there is enough time for each of you to speak, so we encourage you not to talk over each other, allow our listeners and viewers to hear what you have to say. So once again, we are talking about crime in Saskatoon and what you as mayor would do specifically to reduce crime and keep people safe. Mr. Atchison, you can get us started.
Okay. Again, I think we need more officers on the street. Going to precincts doesn't really help anyone at all, because you need to hire 8 officers to man the station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Those resources could be much better spent with officers out there working on behalf of the citizens of Saskatoon. We need to get back to having officers actually talk to the public, deal with them on a one-to-one basis. Those are things that are absolutely critical for our community. Unfortunately, over the past few years, the present council hasn't really looked after policing like they should. They claim that it's 24% of the budget, but in fact, as you see in other communities, the number of officers per 100,000 has declined in Saskatoon. As they've declined, crime has gone up. We need to have more officers, and thanks to the provincial government, they have provided an additional 37 officers to the city of Saskatoon. They're not going to be on the street tomorrow because they have to become have to go through a process. So it'll take about a year or 18 months to get there, but in fact, we're going to get to that particular point of having safer streets in Saskatoon.
Go ahead. It's an open debate.
Well, it's fair enough about adding more police officers on the streets. Certainly, we have a shortage of police officers, even compared to Regina at 242 per 100,000, compared to ours at 203. And even with the 37 officers that are going to be added, in addition to the 53 that are already paid for by the province of Saskatchewan through the municipal police grant, there's still a shortage of officers. So we still need to add those officers. So when Mr. Atchison says, well, that's no answer because we have to add more officers, we have to add those officers. And adding those officers into the community is the best way of being able to do that. Having more officers on the street in local communities, dealing with communities, learning the people in the communities, learning the issues in those communities, avoiding the transportation issues that the police are currently encountering is the only way to really deal with that. More community safety plans for sure, but more officers on the street in local areas around the community. We've seen some success in this when we had the Little Chief Station on 20th Street, which ended up closing down under Mr. Atchison's tenure as mayor. We saw a reduction in crime in those areas when we had that small police station in that area. We can do the same thing across the rest of the city.
I do want to just make a mention. You mentioned that we have fewer officers per capita than Regina, and that is correct. So thank you for that. Go ahead.
So I'm in support of more patrols at this time. I've heard loud and clear from the business community and from neighborhoods about the need to make sure that there is a more constant presence. What I haven't heard, I guess, from my fellow candidates is a plan that's proactive. If we're all in agreement that policing is not going to be a way, we can't arrest our way out of the problems that we are having right now, what are those solutions? And to me, it's working with community and truly trying to figure out what are the pieces that are contributing to this, so that we can make a plan and ensure that we don't need as many police resources in the long run. Right at this moment, I understand why those resources are needed. I think that particularly I'm hearing about the need for a new approach on public transit. And as we are moving to a modern public transportation system, we want that system to be reliable and safe and welcoming for everyone. So those are the pieces that I think sort of distinguish my plan, is that it needs to be proactive. We need to prevent crime before it starts, and we need to make sure we're involving community in solving these problems.
Ms. Block, can I ask you to be a little more specific about what exactly you would do differently?
Well, neighborhood and business community safety plans, like working directly with business districts and working with neighborhoods to, rather than having every business having to lock their doors or otherwise figure out, let's just say, lighting, making contact with police in a way that is actually it's hard to get through on the regular line. It's difficult to go and sign up online to get the reports in. How can we make that really quick? See something, say something, make those connections very quick.
Mr. Atchison?
Well, talk about a plan. We need to get back to what's called ComStats. What that is all the crime is reported. It's put on a screen where you can actually see what's going on. The current Board of Police Commissioners has done away with that. We need to know exactly where it is, what time these incidences occur, and by doing that, the police resources can be focused in those particular areas. Councillor Wyant just said a minute ago that I said about fewer officers. We need more officers on the street, more boots on the street. We don't need them behind a desk. We need them out there dealing with the public.
Thank you all. Do you have one last thing to say?
Well, I mean, nobody said these officers are going to be behind a desk. We need officers on the street. We know that the studies suggest that more officers on the street are to turn to crime. Certainly more community safety plans are in place. I know when the people on the west side were demanding a community safety plan from this current city council, one didn't come forward. So I find it surprising now to learn that we have a candidate for mayor that wants community safety plans who's had 8 years to put these community safety plans in place.
Okay, I want to thank you all for following the guidelines of this debate and speaking clearly and not over one another. Because of that, we do have a few minutes for one more topic this half hour. We're tight on time, so there's going to be no open debate here. You'll each have 1 minute to answer. Our question is, given that it appears there may only be one MLA from Saskatoon in the governing party, how will you make sure this city's concerns will be heard by the provincial government? I'll start with you, Mr. Wyant. You have 1 minute.
Well, we have to open up conversations with the MLAs. And when I was a member of government, we had open conversations with members, not just government MLAs, but MLAs that represented the other side of the House. We need to continue to have that dialogue, making sure that the issues that are brought forward by those MLAs are heard by people in government. And so having those open conversations, having those open dialogues is going to be very important, especially more important now that there's only one sitting MLA on the government side of the House. So how do we do that? We bring everybody together and have those open conversations. That's the only way we're going to do it, through collaboration, through understanding, and through those discussions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Wyant. Mr. Atchison, you have 1 minute.
First of all, throwing the government under the bus doesn't help anyone at all. You need to have those discussions behind closed doors if there's agreements or disagreements that occur. They need to happen on a weekly basis. There needs to be contact with the provincial administration on an ongoing basis all the time. Those are things that really help to focus on what's going on in the city of Saskatoon. Right now, when you talk about us only having one MLA, it's exceedingly important that the city, in fact, have those dialogues with the administration on an ongoing basis. On top of that, I think that we need to be able to tell the government exactly the direction the city wants to go in. That we need to be able to work cooperatively with them. When you hear about the Saskatoon Freeway that's going to take 15 to 20 years now to get built, the city doesn't want to participate financially on it. There are so many things that are going on in the city where they've been at loggerheads in the past, and open and being transparent with them would certainly benefit all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Atchison. Ms. Block, you have 1 minute.
I think leadership is relationship building. I think it matters that we are teaching and learning together what we both need and trying to figure out clear goals and strategies to get there. That's my pledge, and I actually, and my vision is that we would have an opportunity to sit at the table in a way that we don't just talk about the concerns. We talk about how we're going to solve problems together. I have a track record of working with people from a wide swath in our community and beyond. I am someone who has always tried to listen to what people's thoughts and ideas are carefully without judging. And I think those are some of the pieces that we can do as a community, and what I think the mayor needs to do is build relationships in a way that we are ensuring that we are listening and problem solving rather than getting involved with all the things that are going wrong. And I pledge to do that.
All right, thank you so much for that, for following the guidelines, for not talking over one another. For those who are just joining us this morning, we are live down at Glass and Lumber on 20th Street for Saskatoon Votes, the 2024 mayoral debate. You can listen to us live on CBC Radio 194.1 FM. We do have time for a quick open debate if you guys would like to take part. We have about a minute and a half. Are you good for that? Okay. Ms. Block, I'll let you start.
I think that it matters that we are not taking sides when we are the leader of a city. This is not designed to be partisan. I think that my commitment is to ensure that I am working equally and cooperatively with any order of government, regardless of what political party they represent. And that's my commitment really to also like the business community and the ethnocultural community and all the various folks that need to hear. We need to listen, and so they can feel heard. And I think that if we work and collaborate together, we will have a better opportunity to move forward. I think we live in a time where the vitriol is very high and tensions get high, and we need to lower that temperature by being respectful and working together.
We only have about 30 seconds each. Mr. Wyant?
Well, politics has become quite polarized in this province. It's become quite polarized in the country. I have a record of reaching across the aisle to talk and have conversations with my colleagues on the other side of the House, especially in areas like interpersonal violence, where we've worked on programs together. I have every capacity to be able to work across the aisle, across political spectrums, to get done what needs to be done for the betterment of the people of this province.
Mr. Atchison?
I can actually talk to about what we've been able to accomplish. Circle Drive South Bridge, Mistawassa Bridge, the traffic bridge, River Landing, the Shaw Center, the Saskatoon minor football field, soccer facilities. We've been able to work with both the federal government, provincial governments on a non-adversarial type basis. The role of the mayor is not to be a cheerleader for one party or the next. The mayor is there to do what's best for the citizens of Saskatoon. And I've been able to accomplish that in the past. My track record absolutely shows that and proves that.
Thank you. The three of you, thank you so much. The time now is 7:30. Danny Kurzak is here with the CBC News.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good morning. There is concern in the city this morning about remarks made in Ottawa, and it's about the Housing Accelerator Fund. The opposition Conservatives say if elected, that fund will be scrapped. This city qualified for about $41 million in that fund, with much for affordable housing. What's at stake is some 1,600 new rental units. Here's Mayor Charlie Clark.
So to cancel that when we've already put out the tender and we've already got the proposals in place would lose all that momentum and even potentially create some legal or financial headaches that I don't think anybody wants to be dealing with right now.
The Conservatives want to cancel the fund to pay for an alternative housing plan. That plan would cut the GST on new homes sold that cost less than $1 million. We are now into it. Saskatoon Morning is hosting a debate for three people who would like to be the mayor of this city. Don Atchison, Cynthia, Nation. Cameron was running against Ali Bear from Whitecap Dakota First Nation. Both were running to be the head of the FSAN, which represents 74 First Nations across this province. Coming up now to 7:33, it is partly cloudy and -3. This is Saskatoon Morning. Traffic this morning, some work is happening on 25th from 4th to 5th. Two-way traffic will shift over to one lane there a little bit later this morning. And you can call us with the traffic report anytime. It's 306-956-7456. A student was hit by a vehicle at an Eastside high school this week. It happened at Aidan Bowman Collegiate at the intersection of Taylor and Clarence. The girl was taken to hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. That is a very busy intersection, and now the high school is asking drivers and people walking there to be careful. Back to the provincial election this morning. The NDP is doing better than the Sask Party in mail-in ballots. Election Saskatchewan completed the first round of counting on Wednesday. As a result, CBC is projecting 4 more seats for the NDP and 1 more for the Sask Party. Saskatoon Westview and Saskatoon Willow Grove remain too close to call. Eric Grenier is a political analyst for the Writ.ca.
It has been enough to swing Saskatoon Westview because the margins had been so close with the advance poll and election day poll. Probably will not be enough to swing any other ridings, but it does show how every vote will have an impact in this election campaign.
The NDP candidate in Saskatoon Westview took the lead after the mail-in ballots were counted, while the Sask Party's lead did shrink a bit in Saskatoon Willow Grove. Women are projected to make up more than 30% of the legislature after Monday's provincial election. The NDP says 48% of its projected winners are women. Equal Voice, a charity dedicated to improving gender representation, confirms it's 24% for the Sask Party. The executive director of Equal Voice, Ji Wing, says it's an important moment for women in this province.
The Saskatchewan legislature has tipped over what we call critical mass. And so this is a concept where if you have 1 or 2 out of 50 people, those 1 or 2 people might feel really tokenized in their experience. And so what happens when you hit critical mass at that 30% is that the culture can start to shift and evolve.
The charity is aiming for 50% women and gender diverse representation across all provinces. I'm Danny Kerslake, and those are the city's top news stories for this hour. News anytime on our website, CBC Saskatoon.
Thank you, Danny. Well, it is a great start to the month of November. We're expecting a high of 6 today. Tonight, a little chilly. We'll dip down to -8, and with that wind chill feeling a little closer to that -12 degree mark. Right now, though, it is -3, feeling a little closer to -7 with that wind chill. But again, going to be a beautiful Friday and into the weekend. Welcome back to our Saskatoon Votes 2024 Mayor's Debate. We are joined by 3 candidates who hope to become Saskatoon's next mayor. Don Atchison, say hello.
Good morning and welcome to the listeners.
Cynthia Block.
Good morning, Stephanie.
And Gord Wyant.
Good morning.
We now want to move on to the topic of homelessness. There are more people in our city than ever experiencing homelessness. In a 2023 Citizens Survey, it ranked number 1 in a topic of concern. Just a quick reminder, each of you will have 1 minute to respond to our next question. We will then open the floor for debate. The question we have for you is, if you were in power, how would you help people in our city experiencing homelessness? Ms. Block, you'll go first. 1 minute.
So if you talk to fire, police, or service providers, they will tell you that the situation on the street is changing faster than policymakers and service providers can keep pace. We know what needs to happen. We need to get folks off the streets into safe housing, but there also has to be an ability to transition them out. So those are tools that your city doesn't have other than policing. We have police and fire working on this. But unless or until we have a way to accelerate better resources for this, it's not going to change. My plan is to make sure that we have residents and businesses at the table. I think this has been critically missing in terms of being able to teach and learn together what we can do together. Alongside fire, police, service providers, and others, what we need to do is figure out exactly what we need in our streets. How do we support people who are unhoused? How do we advocate together? And how do we then plan to deploy resources in a way that is best served by our community?
Thank you, Ms. Block. Mr. Wyant?
Well, this is a multifaceted approach that we need to bring other levels of government together. Certainly, we have a plan to assemble all the abandoned houses, houses that have been, not just abandoned houses, houses that the city has taken for taxes, bring all those together, houses that aren't being fully utilized by the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation. I've had a conversation with the minister about this. Bring these houses all together, bring industry to the table, bring post-secondary education to the table, Sask Polytechnic, SIIT, who want to develop home renovation programs, bring all those people to the table, including government and industry, to develop a program where we can renovate those houses and then provide them to the housing authorities in the city that provide safe and affordable housing. In addition to that, we need to connect the people that are going into those houses to the services they need to make sure that the houses, that they have safe houses to live in. And so my plan is to bring all that together with industry, with education, and with the government to provide the kinds of housing. There's hundreds and hundreds of vacant and abandoned houses in the city. We can take advantage of those.
Thank you, Mr. Wyant. Mr. Atchison?
Well, first of all, homelessness has different categories to it. There's mental illness, there's drug addiction, there's brain injury. Then we have families, single parents with children, seniors. We have our military veterans, and we have people who've just fallen upon hard times. They went to work today and the doors were locked. Where will they go? We need to be able to separate them. People that are in homeless shelters right now, a lot of them feel not safe either. So what we need to do is, in fact, we need to categorize them. They need to be assessed, and we need to set up what are called tiny homes. We need to have emergency shelters. The last time I heard that there's going to be winter and there's going to be 40 below. We can't have people sleeping on the streets. We cannot have children having to sleep under foyers, in stairwells, and on heating ducts. We need to deal with that immediately. So we need to, in fact, have these tiny homes. They need to be set up in an area where there is no residential, no commercial at this particular point in time. It's out in the open. The city of Saskatoon has thousands of acres that we're able to accommodate. Some challenge me on that, but I certainly believe that we need to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Atchison, and thank you all for following that 1-minute guideline. Because of that, we're now going to have 10 minutes for an open debate on this topic. And a reminder, you will all get your chance to speak. There is plenty of time, so we encourage you not to talk over each other and really allow our listeners and viewers to hear what you have to say. The question for the open debate is going to be a little bit different. The next council will be tasked with finding at least one new spot for a permanent shelter. We want to hear, where would you like to see the new shelter be built? Ms. Block, you can get us started.
It's part of the reason why I think the task force is important. Not necessarily to be a part of how they are chosen, but to be a part of the how do we define that process. People don't fully understand how these decisions are made. It is the provincial government's responsibility to choose where the housing for a homeless shelter goes. But recently, we agreed to help the province choose a location, which is why we have an emergency location that is now going to be built in the downtown. The struggle is that nobody wants it in their backyard. And I think that what we have to talk about is what's possible. And I do think that the task force will be very useful in this, because it'll be forward-facing and solutions-based and measurable. And if we know we have a struggle in terms of location, let's talk about what that really means. All of the research suggests that putting it on the outskirts of a city never works. Putting it even in an industrial section, the only one that I'm aware of that is successful is only for complete sobriety. The model needs to be close to services. It has to be close to transit. There's a variety of reasons why we have to think carefully about it. I'm not going to say today, like, this is the location, because we do need to do that in partnership with our community, in partnership with the provincial government, and we also urgently need to make sure this federal leadership. We need a national strategy to a national problem. And I support a housing first approach because it works. And I think if we are able to get federal dollars and deploy them directly in our city, we will start to affect change that is measurable and ensure that people are safely housed and have an opportunity to transition out of homelessness.
Mr. Atchison, you talk about the tiny homes and placing them kind of on the outskirts of the city, like Ms. Block mentioned. My question is, if that is where you want them, maybe you can elaborate more on how those people would then access the services they need for mental health addictions that are primarily in the downtown core.
That's a great question, because what needs to happen, first of all, is you need to, again, define who are the people that are going to be staying in these emergency shelters as well. Throwing them all together again is what I hear is no one breaks it down as, are we talking about mental illness? Are we talking about drug addiction? Are we talking about families? Who are we talking about? Because they're all different. And if you don't break it down into that category, it's tough to give an answer. So let's start off with, first of all, no one wants it in their own backyard. And I don't blame them for that. Because if you look at Fairhaven right now, those people there bought into one program and now they've been sold a different bill of goods. And it's not fair and it's not acceptable. Look what we did out in Silver Spring. Out there, the psych center, the federal psych center was built, and then homes built around it later. Look at Sask Corrections in the industrial area. What happened there? It was out in the middle of nowhere, and everyone built around it. What needs to happen here is the city has thousands of acres of land that they can in fact be able to use to help accommodate the provincial government. This is not a mandate of the city, but the city certainly needs to be able to help on a financial basis on the capital side, not the operating side. When you ask about how are we going to get there and that transit's absolutely critical, what about other people that want to go to university today? What about seniors that want to take access transit in that? Don't they count also? What are we going to do for them? So what we need to do, in fact, at the end of the day is you can set up time frames for when they can go downtown or to a bus hub or whatever the case might be to get further transportation to where they need to go. What we're dealing about right now is everyone wants to get into the weeds and they're saying, your plan won't work. Well, I can tell you one thing right now. I have a plan and no one else does. And that's what's really critical. We need to make sure that everyone in our community this winter has a safe, clean, reliable place to live in. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to make sure that that happens. People shouldn't have to sleep in a tent this winter. They should be able to have a tiny home that provides them either with a stove, a fridge, a sink, a washroom, electric heat as well. Those are things that we can accomplish immediately with the provincial government, and we can get it done.
I just want to remind everyone we are talking specifically about those experiencing homelessness in our city. Mr. Wyant?
Well, it makes sense. I'll tell you one thing. I'm not going to participate in any program that doesn't have full public consultation when it comes to the location of the shelter. We've seen 2 shelters that have been located here in the city of Saskatoon without any public consultation at all, the one on the west side and the one downtown. We know that those facilities are located to vulnerable populations. We need to make sure that we put the facility in an area that's not going to be close to vulnerable populations, and we know that the city has already recognized that with the issues and the conversations that went on in Sutherland. So we need to make sure that we have full public consultation in terms of where these shelters are going to be located. They need to be located near services. There's no question about that. But there's no reason why those services can't be relocated as well. And so making sure that we provide the services to the people that are there, whether they're there for addictions, whether they're there homelessness or mental health, making sure that there's workers available so that they can work with those individuals and get them on the right path. I believe in the one roof concept where we have all this under one roof, homelessness and the facilities that are required to enhance the program delivery that those individuals need. But and I fully believe that the City of Saskatoon should be participating in those locations because the City of Saskatoon is responsible for zoning. They're responsible for public consultation. That's why the City of Saskatoon needs to be involved in the location of the shelters.
Ms. Block?
I'll just say that I agree the public consultation is needed. I think what would be more beneficial is if that public consultation happened without a location being chosen at that point. And what I mean is that if we decide together as a community, once we understand, here's the scope of the problem, here are the options that we can consider, what would it look like if you don't know whose neighborhood it could potentially be in, or what business district? What would it feel like to you, and what would the resources be needed in order to make that successful, so that people who require housing are feeling supported in whatever community that they're in, but that we don't start first with location, that we start first with the process, so that we have an agreement at least about how we're solving this problem together. I think that would be a benefit to everyone.
Mr. Atchison?
Process means that you actually don't know what's going on at the end, and it's a good way to divert from where you need to go. It's interesting what we hear again right now is about dropping these homeless shelters into communities. That's not what people bought into. You need to take green space, undeveloped land that's a distance away from absolutely everything, because then we can look after the people that require it. Everyone wants to make sure that they have a safe, clean place to live in. I don't think anyone in the city can deny that. So why would you want to start off with confrontational end of things again? Let's don't talk about what neighborhood it's going to be in. Well, guess what? It's going to be in someone's neighborhood with what the other two are saying right now. I'm saying is forget about that. Get to a green area where there's no housing at all, no commercial right now. The city has thousands of acres of land. They can work in cooperation with the provincial government, and we can get to the other end, and everyone can be satisfied. It's a win-win for everyone. What we're hearing now is, well, some communities will win, some communities will lose, and that's not what the city of Saskatoon should be about.
I'll give you a minute, Ms. Block, but first, Mr. Wyant.
Well, I mean, that's not particularly fair. I mean, I've never said that we should put these in residential areas. As a matter of fact, I spoke up against the shelter that's going downtown in the residential area, especially because of the fact that it was near vulnerable populations. We've poisoned this city with respect to the location of these shelters as a result of what's happened on the west side. Because every time you start talking about a location of the shelter in this city, people go back to what's happened over in Fairhaven. And that's exactly what they're going to expect. It's going to happen in their neighborhood. And that's why we couldn't get the process moving forward in the Sutherland area, because they saw what happened there and they didn't want it in their neighborhood. So we have to come up with a different kind of solution. I agree that we need to have shelters in this city. We need to make sure we're keeping people safe as we're getting them into the programming they need, but not in residential areas and not near vulnerable populations.
Ms. Block.
I agree that the provincial model in Fairhaven isn't working and that we need a different approach. But what I would like to speak to is the opportunities that I have had to actually walk the streets, visit with people who are unhoused, talk directly with service providers, fire and police, and learn what it is that people who are unhoused need, what they want and need from their community. And what I have learned is that they have community and they want to be a part of our community, that we are all part of this community. It's not the people who are unhoused are somehow, citizens here that deserve to be in some place that we shall assign in a different part of the outskirts of our city. It's about understanding what they need. And their community needs, no matter where that shelter is, they are very likely, and this is the examples we see across North America, they're going to come to where their friends are, to where they feel that they are supported, and that's usually in the cores of cities. That's generally speaking where it is. I think that those pieces, my task force will include people who have experience with homelessness. Those are important elements to make sure that we're moving forward in a way that not only is fair to everybody, but actually gets results and makes sure that we all feel supported.
I just want to make sure we have about a minute. I want to make sure we're going to move on to another topic. Is everyone okay, or does anyone want another thing to say?
I just want to say, homelessness is more than drug addiction, mental illness. We keep on forgetting about families, single parents with children, seniors. They require different types of accommodations. What we're hearing right now is about Fairhaven, where everyone's thrown into the same area together. That's not fair to the homeless at all, by any stretch of the imagination, depending on what area they're from.
I hear what you're saying, so I guess how would you separate those two groups? Like, who's going to go in the tiny homes, and where are the people who need the
I'm thrilled you
services
asked the
gonna go?
question. I'm thrilled. Because what happens, first of all, is when police officers are involved, they don't have the abilities to assess people. We need to have a provincial area that has an assessment spot available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. They can determine what type of help, assistance that people are going to require. What happens right now is people are dropped off at the homeless shelter or dropped off over here, whatever the case might be, and that's not fair to anyone at all, and including their safety as well. People in a lot of these homeless shelters fear for their safety. We need to be able to separate them, and that's what's being lost in this discussion.
Okay, I want to.
This is why we have PAC teams where we have crisis workers working with police to make sure that we can get people into the right services that we need. We already have a lot of this. We need more of it, but we already have some of this service being provided.
All right, I want to thank you three so much. Time is up for that discussion. We are live at Glass and Lumber for Saskatoon Votes 2024 Mayor's Debate. For those just joining us, I'm Stepanie Massicotte, host of Saskatoon Morning. We're joined by mayoral candidates Gord Wyant, Cynthia Block, and Don Atchison. We do have a few minutes for another quick topic this half hour. Again, we will have time for a little short open debate. But first, you're going to have 1 minute to answer this next question, which is regarding the downtown arena. This outgoing council has voted in support of the arena, but I want to ask a simple question. Do you think building a new arena downtown is a good idea, even if it ends up costing taxpayers money? Again, you will have 1 minute to respond. Mr. Atchison, you go first.
The answer is no. And the reason being is until you have safe and secure downtown, it doesn't matter what you do. If you look at what's happened in Edmonton, their rink was $625 million. We're not going to build our rink here for $625 million by any stretch of the imagination. People don't want to come downtown. They talk about how it's going to rejuvenate downtown, how it's going to bring more economic viability. It comes from other areas. It's a trade-off. Right now, what we need to do is we need to look and focus on what the essential things in our community are. We need to deal with needs, not wants, and the rink may be a nice thing to have, but we don't need it today. And a lot of people, what they're saying right now is, what about my snow removal? What about policing? What about homelessness? What about food security? What are you going to do in those areas? I think those are things that we need to focus on far more than what we're doing right now. And so at this time, it's interesting that candidate Wyant has said yes to the deed, but no to the rink. I don't know how that works because they're all part and parcel of one.
Mr. Wyant?
Say that. I didn't say that. I support, no, I didn't, Don. I support downtown revitalization. Certainly I was on council with Don when he was mayor and saw some significant revitalization in South Downtown. I support more convention space at TCU Place. That's what I support. But I don't support any other development in downtown Saskatoon, especially with respect to the rink, that's going to materially affect, or at least at all affect, the mill rate. The funding model is flawed. It's going to ultimately affect some significant impact on our mill rate. It already has with the funding model. It has a subclass in there that's going to add more taxes to our downtown hotels. We've already spent, at least from our calculation, about $20 million on land acquisition in the downtown area. And even the tax incremental funding piece has a material impact on the tax rate. And so the funding model, as the way it is right now in terms of building the downtown arena, is significantly flawed. And any flaw in that funding model is going to impact the mill rate. We have other matters that we need to deal with in the city around safety and infrastructure.
Ms. Block?
My answer is also no, and I've been really clear that if there's going to be an impact to property tax, I will not support moving SaskTel Centre from the north end to downtown. In the overall vision of the future, does this overall project need to go forward? I think it makes all the sense in the world. If we want a city that's more affordable, more efficient, and more sustainable, we will want the city center plan to move forward, which is inclusive of the arena and a modern public trade and convention center, livable, walkable space that connects to Meewasin. I mean, the list goes on about what a future-looking city could look like. But be very clear that cities make plans all the time, and they sit on shelves and they eventually perhaps get funded. But if there's a flaw in the funding model, I don't think that today is the day that we need to worry about that. This is years in the future that we need to be talking about that, not today. But I also really want to say one important thing that's lost in this conversation. SaskTel Centre cannot continue to make money, and we need to work urgently to figure out how to make that move if we are not going to have this on property tax.
We have a minute to continue this discussion. Mr. Wyant?
Well, SaskTel Centre is profitable. It is profitable. We see a profit that goes to the city of Saskatoon every year. And to say that this hasn't already impacted the mill rate is wrong. We've seen the city of Saskatoon spend at least $20 million on land acquisition. We've seen them spend money on consultants. We've seen them spend money on a party that to celebrate the opening of the deed, the celebration to announce the deed, and we've seen them spend money on a $1,400 cake to celebrate that. All these things are taxpayers' money. And so to suggest that there hasn't been an impact on the mill rate already is wrong. And there'll be an impact on the mill rate going forward, given the fact that there'll be a lot of property that's owned by the city of Saskatoon that isn't going to be receiving the tax revenue. So there is a significant impact. The mayor of Saskatoon he's already suggested that there will be an impact on the mill rate by the construction of this project.
Thank you. You have about 20 seconds, maybe each.
Okay, well, first of all, the other two candidates both agreed on the chamber to deed. They both said yes. When we were out at the West End event, Gord, in fact, said yes to deed, no to the rink. Block didn't show up for that. But the bottom line is, when I was the mayor, we actually, first time ever, we're turning a profit out at SaskTel Center on an ongoing basis. The downtown one, they already said it's going to cost $500,000 a year for us to operate it. Where's the money going to come from? It's going to come from the mill rate. They said it wasn't going to, but it is.
I just need to give you about 10 seconds. Sorry, Cynthia.
Well, this is fast and loose with the facts, and nobody's moving forward with deed, and that's the honest answer.
Okay, thank you so much. We are on a live radio show, so we are in a bit of a time crunch. It is a few minutes now before 8 o'clock, and we're going to throw things over to Danny Kerslake for your news headlines.
Well, there is some concern this morning about the Housing Accelerator Fund. The federal opposition leader says if elected, he would scrap it. But the fund would bring $41 million to the city, and at stake is 1,600 new rental units. The mayor says he's asking the federal Conservatives to reconsider their plans. To the provincial election, the NDP is doing better than the Sask Party in mail-in ballots. As a result, CBC is projecting 4 more seats for the NDP and 1 more for the Sask Party, but Saskatoon Westview and Saskatoon Willow Grove remain too close to call. Traffic this morning, we're seeing some busy traffic on Idlewild as you make your way off the freeway and through downtown. Also a little bit busy up on the north part of Circle Drive. Anytime you're seeing a traffic issue, you can let us know at 306-956-7456.
Thank you so much, Danny. All right, we are 1 hour into Saskatoon Votes 2024 Mayor's Debate. Thank you all again for joining us. If you're listening to us on 94.1 FM or on the CBC Listen app. If you want to watch this live debate, if you're not already, we are streaming online at cbc.ca/Saskatoon and on our CBC News Saskatchewan YouTube page. Stay with us. We'll be back with more on this debate. Right now, World Report is next. Good morning. I'm Stepanie Massicotte. This is Saskatoon Morning. We are live this morning at Glass and Lumber on 20th Street for the Saskatoon Votes 2024 mayoral debate. If you're tuning in on 94.1 FM or on the CBC Listen app, welcome. If you want to watch the debate, head over to our CBC Saskatchewan's YouTube page or our website, cbc.ca/Saskatoon, where we are streaming live. We'll get back into our live debate in just a minute. But first, Danny Kerslake joins us. Good morning, Danny. What's making news?
Early voting begins today in the local election. Advance polls run from today until Monday from noon to 8 each night. You can even vote in your vehicle in a drive-through. That's happening tomorrow in the City Hall parking lot off of 4th Avenue. Election day is on the 13th. A student was hit by a vehicle at an Eastside high school this week. It happened at Aidan Bowman Collegiate at the intersection of Taylor and Clarence. The girl was taken to hospital and is expected to make a full recovery. That's a very busy intersection, and now the high school is asking drivers and people walking there to be careful.
Well, it is a chilly start to the morning, but we are expecting a high of 6 today after a lovely Halloween night. Tonight, though, it's going to dip back down below 0. We're going to hit -8, but with that wind chill, it's going to feel a little more like -12, but nice that we had that little reprieve for Halloween. Right now, it is -3, feeling a little closer to that -6 degree mark with that wind chill. Danny, how's traffic looking?
Well, happy Friday, because traffic looks okay right now. There are no trouble spots you need to avoid. If you're seeing something, though, let us know at 306-956-7456.
Thanks so much, Danny. The time now is 12 minutes after 8 o'clock. Welcome back to Saskatoon Votes 2024 Mayor's Debate. We once again are joined by 3 candidates vying to be Saskatoon's next mayor. Don Atchison, good morning.
Good morning.
Cynthia Block.
Good morning.
And Gord Wyant.
Good morning.
If you missed any part of the last hour, just a reminder, it will be up on our YouTube page after the show. Next up, I want to address affordability in our city, specifically the burden of property taxes. Just one more reminder, each of you will have 1 minute to respond to our next question, and then we will open the floor for debate. The question I want to ask is, do you have a target for tax hikes during your term, and how would you achieve that target? Mr. Wyant, we'll start with you.
Well, we've developed an 8-point budget renewal plan, which will see a cap on mill rate in the next year. We know that the taxes are going up at least 6% in the second year of the 2-year budget that's already been approved by City Council. We believe that that can be trimmed down significantly. So we want to put a cap on the budget increase, talking about 2% in the next year of the budget. We think we can find those additional savings within the existing budget by doing some performance audits, by doing some audits within the kind of programming that the City of Saskatoon is already providing. We think that there's some significant work that can be done to find some efficiencies within the budget to fill the vacancy that will be created by the reducing the mill rate. We do think, though, that there are a number of other things that can be done at City Hall in terms of creating more efficiencies at City Hall. We think not only a cap, we also believe that the auditor should go in and do the efficiency audits, which we require. We also really think that there should be some opportunities.
Mr. Wyant, sorry, we will have time for the open debate.
Yeah.
I just have to give you each a minute. Mr. Atchison?
First of all, I think what we need to do is have a 0% increase in taxes next year. Excuse me. And then how we're going to get there? We're going to have a hiring freeze in the city of Saskatoon, except for police officers, because we need more of those. We're going to look at reducing our capital replacement reserve, our capital reserve as well. And we're also going to take the end of debt reduction that comes with the end of bills that the city owns, and that we're going to apply that to it as well. What we're looking for is approximately $20 million on a $1 billion budget, and I think we can absolutely find that there. When we talk about efficiencies in that, I'm quite interested in that all the time. because it's really the administration that needs to come up with that. We need to come up with things, for example, like permitting. What we can do there is if the permits aren't put out in time, the permitting fee actually is reduced to the person making the application. We need to force the administration into thinking new and in different ways.
Thank you, Mr. Atchison. Ms. Block?
There's no question that we are facing an extraordinary inflationary period, and that municipalities are being impacted more so than even consumers. But that doesn't change the fact that we're all frustrated about the cost of everything rising. Just to put that in some perspective, a fire engine in 2020 cost $800,000 and today costs $1.5 million. It's very hard to say no to funding things that we know our city needs, whether it's emergency services, roads, sidewalks, the basic infrastructure that our residents count on. I would like to see an innovative approach in terms of how to reduce the pressure on property taxes. I mean, there's all the things about smart growth and modern public transportation system, but I think that we need innovative funding and procurement by working with other cities to reduce those big capital costs and asking for national leadership on national issues such as baseline funding for transit.
Thank you so much. I just want to remind everyone, so far the tax hike in 2025 was 5.42%. We are going to move on to our 9-minute open debate. Again, the topic is on affordability and taxes. If you are promising to lower taxes, what services would you cut? Mr. Wyant, you can start us off.
Well, I think what we need to do is look at the core services of government. If you want to know what the core services of your municipality are, you just have to look at your tax bill. They're right there: fire, police, infrastructure, snow removal, recreation. Those are the things that people want tax dollars to be concentrated on, and I think that that's where we've really been falling down as a city, concentrating on those things. So small little issues. I mean, we pay for obedience classes for dogs at off-leash parks. We have free EV charging in the city, and that might be good for some people, but I'm not really sure why the city of Saskatoon pays for those things. We need to get back to the core services of government and stay within our lane and stop taking control over issues that are provincial responsibilities or federal government responsibilities. The Chamber of Commerce has recognized that in their pledge. We need to get away from doing things that are the responsibility of other levels of government, and that's where we're going to find the efficiencies within our budget.
Mr. Atchison?
It's interesting you said about tax increases. I'm saying no tax increase next year at all. And the reason being is we need to get back to our needs, not our wants. You may want something, but do we need something? We need to get back to the basics again. Policing, water, wastewater, transportation. Those are things that are absolutely essential for all citizens in Saskatoon. The fringe items, unfortunately, there's going to perhaps have to be some difficult decisions made. But on top of it, we still get additional revenues as well. There's the waste a reduction program that the province has that we'll be receiving significant funds from, that some of those dollars should be in fact directed back to the utility that's being charged now for people for having their garbage picked up, their recycling, their composting. Those dollars can in fact help in that particular area. On top of it, we'll be receiving more funding from the province next year through the revenue sharing program, which I'm proud to say that I was part of when it was at 1%. Has been reduced to 3% right now, but 0.75%. And what we need to get back to is that 1% where we're going to have to talk to the province again about increasing our revenue sharing portion of it.
I guess, Mr. Atchison, a
Yes.
0% hike would likely require some serious cuts. So what specific departments would you cut?
Well, first of all, I just finished saying earlier already about the debt reduction, about not hiring additional staff anymore. We do have retirements coming. The other day at another function, candidate Wyant said that I was going to say that we were going to reduce staffing, administrative staff, by 50%. I have never, ever said that. And in fact, that was someone else that said that, not I. I would never do that. On top of it, so when we talk about those particular areas, those are things that we can do. We're looking for $20 million. People can no longer afford to pay additional taxes right now. They're taxed out, they're spent out, they're looking at how can they afford to even stay in their homes today, how can they buy food for their children. Those are things that we need to focus on. So when you ask me what areas are we going to cut, Councillor Wyant made a wonderful point. What about the EV stations? What about the training of dogs in parks and that? We also heard about the cost of buying new fire engines. Well, the city of Saskatoon abandoned their capital replacement for the fire department at one point in time, and now we're bearing the brunt of that as well.
Ms. Block, I want to give you a minute to speak, but I also want to know if you have a specific number for a tax hike next year.
I think that that would be foolish to actually say a specific number. Can we do it? Absolutely we can. We can have 0%. It's the what is the cost. I am absolutely in favor of value for money audits, but I think that people have to understand that there's always, it's one thing to say, well, we'll just reduce staff. Reducing staff means giving up something on the service side. So what are we prepared to do as a city? I mean, if the city, if our community is telling us that there are ways to do that, I'm always going to be open to listening, which I always have. I think that what I would like to say is that I have been a strong advocate for the things that Mr. Wyant in particular has outlined, making sure we're looking after the basics. This has been a record year of investment for basic infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, underground infrastructure, as it has been every single year since I've been elected. We are now getting on best practices for these things. I don't want to see us roll back those programs that will then just cost more in the future and potentially put it on future generations. It matters to me that our assets are strong. I'm proud that we have a AAA credit rating, that Standard & Poor's say we are in the top 3 best managed cities in all of Canada for transparency, accountability, low debt, and high liquidity. These are the ways we have to look at how we are funding our city. A AAA credit rating means we can do things at a lower cost. Does that mean we don't have work to do in terms of lowering the impact on property tax? Absolutely. Baseline funding for national strategies is one. Working with other municipalities to bring down the costs of large infrastructure pieces like fire engines. Those are my plans to try to move very effectively in a short amount of time, but in the long run, we simply need to grow smarter. We need to grow inward and upward along link. These are the ways in the long run that we become a less expensive city, a more efficient city, and also a more sustainable one.
Mr. Wyant?
Well, in all due respect, in the first forum that we participated in as candidates, Don did say he was going to reduce the administrative staff by 50%. He said that. And as far as the tax rate was concerned, there was 63 times last year where there was an opportunity to reduce the mill rate increase in the second year in the budget, and 63 times Councillor Block voted to block those attempts by other councillors to reduce the mill rate. So to suggest that there's now these great opportunities to reduce the mill rate going forward in a budget that's already been approved, it seems to me that what we really need to do is to get back to the basics. We need to look at what the core services of government are and avoid taking up space that other governments should be responsible for. We have record revenue sharing from the province. It was up $14 million last year. More revenue sharing from the province, more tax revenue that's come in from the property tax base. I don't believe that we have a revenue problem in this city. I think we have a spending problem, and that's what we need to get to.
I do really want to get to affordable housing in our city. You could say what you want to say about that as well, but I do want to ask about the city's recent plans to leverage federal dollars to get more affordable housing built. Pierre Poilievre has said he would reverse the Housing Accelerator Fund if he forms the next government. So my question is, do you support the federal government's Housing Accelerator Fund and the zoning changes that come along with it? I'll let Ms. Block start in case you want to rebut on that last mark and then go into this Housing Accelerator.
So I supported the Housing Accelerator Fund in its totality because it addresses the urgent matter of lack of housing in a city that is growing at a faster pace than any other place in Canada. We are seeing severe pressure on rent and just people's basic ability to be housed. It matters to me that we are moving those things forward. We need to move forward with affordable housing and attainable housing. And by upzoning along the Link Transportation Corridor, this allows for different types of property mix. It allows for lower costs for people to live close to Link if that's the mode of transportation they choose. But it's not lost on me that this means an intrusion into neighborhoods that none of us wanted to do at this point in our city's history. We have beautiful heritage neighborhoods. So my plan is to introduce regulation. I've worked with the Saskatoon Builders Home Association And the plan will be to incentivize mixed use directly along the corridors. And by doing that, de-incentivize moving that into the interior of neighborhoods.
Okay, I want to give you each 30 seconds, Don, or Mr. Atchison.
Adamantly opposed to the Housing Accelerator Fund, a disaster for the city of Saskatoon. On top of it, the current council and previous one, when I was under my leadership, we had 500 homes a year of attainable, affordable housing. Over a 5-year period, we did 2,624. The city of Saskatoon, under the current leadership and with Councillor Block, have reduced that number in 2021. Their goal was only for 200 attainable, affordable housing units. They did 120 only. Look at the shortfall that we've had over that period of time. That's why we're in the problems we're in today, is because they didn't have the vision, they didn't have the foresight to see how the city was going to grow. There are reports on council that shows what was required for housing, and they've abandoned all of that.
Mr. Wyant, you have 30 seconds.
Well, I spoke out about this at the bridge when the Housing Accelerator Fund came forward. I'm fully supportive of more density in the city of Saskatoon, but to throw away 120 years of planning in this city of Saskatoon for $41 million, none of which I don't think we're not going to receive the whole $41 million. And now we've heard that the leader of the opposition, if he's elected next year, is going to throw away the whole plan. We've seen lawsuits commenced in the city of Calgary and the city of Winnipeg against those cities by residents opposed to the Housing Accelerator Fund. We know there's law firms that have been retained in the city of Saskatoon by residents who want to take the city of Saskatoon on the zoning changes. It's going to impact the city of Saskatoon from a legal perspective, and now with the changes that are going to proposed to be made by a new government in Ottawa, it's going to expose the city of Saskatoon to even more liability with respect to the commitments that they've already made. That's why I had said at the very beginning, we needed to slow this process down, work on a different agreement with the federal government that was a Saskatoon-made approach, and we didn't get that, and now we're in the circumstances we're in.
Thank you, Mr. Wyant. Thank all three of you. We have reached the end of our debate, but we want to give you each a minute for closing remarks. Ms. Block, you will go first. You have 1 minute.
Thank you. I guess I want our city to move forward and not backward. I want Saskatoon to be a livable, walkable, affordable, and safe place for all people. Building that requires an approach that is, not just doing one thing. You can't just say we're going to cut spending or you have to look at the whole thing in totality. I think that a city that is of our size, growing by 33,000 people in only the last 3 years, that we need to make sure that we move forward with smart growth. The link corridor, we need to make sure that we are looking at innovative funding strategies. We need to remember that Saskatoon is a place that looks after people, and we need to make public policy that invites people in and make sure that we are a city that's for everyone, for all of us, not just some of us.
Thank you, Ms. Block. Mr. Wyant, you have 1 minute.
Well, I started this campaign back on June the 11th based on 3 principles: smart spending, safer streets, and more accountability and transparency. And those are the issues that we're hearing at the doors. We've knocked literally thousands and thousands of doors in the city of Saskatoon, and constantly came up at those doors was we want safer streets. We want to be able to live in our neighborhoods. We want to be able to walk our streets. We want to be able to go downtown. We want to feel safe in our communities. And we want the city of Saskatoon to be more responsible with its spending. As I've said before, we don't have a revenue problem in the city. We have a spending problem, and we're hearing that at the door all the time. We're hearing that people aren't happy with the core services that are being delivered by the city of Saskatoon. Those are the things that we need to get back to: accountability, transparency, fiscal responsibility, and safer streets.
Thank you, Mr. Wyant. Mr. Atchison?
I remember when progressive meant a bright future for the city. It didn't mean that there was going to be big government, big spends, but in fact we would have financial stability in our city. I look at the deed program that we have right now that they want to force upon the citizens of Saskatoon. I'm adamantly opposed to that. What we need right now is we need to have safe streets, safe communities. We need to have better transportation as well throughout our community. These things are not happening right now in our city. We need to budget as we should be doing on an ongoing basis all the time. And that's why I'm saying about a 0% increase in 2025. In fact, we're receiving enough revenues. It's just a question of how are we going to allocate those revenues to everyone. So at the end of the day, under my experience and my leadership in the past, we had a strong, vibrant, safe, and healthy community. And I'm asking those today on November the 13th, and starting with advance polls, to vote Don Atchison. Thank you.
Mr. Atchison. Thank you so much to all three of our candidates for joining us this morning, and for all of you tuning in. Advance polls open later this morning and run through Monday. There's also voting at the U of S next week. The election will take place on November 13th. The time now is 8:30. Denny Kerslake is here with the CBC News.
Thank you, Stephanie, and good morning. The federal opposition says it will cut the Housing Accelerator Fund if elected. This city qualified for tens of millions of dollars for